Hello, board. Well, it's the 16th of September, the day after the 15th September board meeting. And I've decided to come to you today via video, as you suggest, as a way to communicate to you what I was going to tell you last night had we had a chance for public comment. You've seen me before, but you probably don't know anything about me. I'm from Gainesville District. I'm a retired Army Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel. I father to three, grandfather to five. My grandkids are scattered from Virginia to Florida to the state of Washington. Um, I don't have any kids in Prince William County schools, but I'm a taxpayer. And actually, I understand that I really think that parents should have the first say, but I know from talking to a number of parents that they are anxious to speak out for fear of retribution, many of them, on any kind of controversial issue, and many are just too engaged in life to be messing around with local politics and the school board. And I can say I've been one of those all of my life until recently. So I'm to some extent playing catch up. Um, had I had a chance to talk to you, I would have asked for a few seconds as a point of personal privilege to have a moment of silence for the veterans who are feeling so um, down um, over the surrender of Afghanistan to the Taliban and the most dramatically leaving behind um, thousands of people who should have been able to get out, including American citizens. So, if you'll indulge me, I'll do that now. Thank you. I think it's important to recognize that veterans from my era to the present and active duty members are traumatized by probably the worst defeat in American history, certainly in my lifetime. So I hope you can appreciate. That's why I always start with thanking the vets. Now, as we waited last night for the speaker opportunity, I think it was about an hour. Um, Everybody was sitting there milling around, and I basically stood up and I expressed my opinion to the group, those that were listening, that I didn't think this was a way um, public comment should be handled anywhere. And I'll tell you that, and part of what I plan on telling you tonight is my feelings on that, and I'll have to try to do it in a reasonable way. I asked the crowd, I said, how many veterans are here? And I don't know, 15 raised their hands. Then I asked how many veterans' family members are here. Almost everybody in the room raised their hands. I asked about Gold Star families, and thankfully no one raised their hand, which was a bit of a sigh of relief. So I'm going to tell you a little bit what I think about your public comment agenda. I know you've already passed it, and I think, frankly, you're going to pass it whether we had anything to say about it or not, which is the impression you've definitely given, at least to me. I am glad that you decided to keep the comment period together. I think you did that. It's not real clear to me, but that was my understanding. I was opposed to your limitation of signs. I find them useful, certainly as a job aid and for me as a communication aid and to keep me on track to what I was going to talk about. So I presume you got rid of those. You have a provision in your policy that allows for town hall forums to provide public input on specific topics of concern. I'll say more about that. But one of the things I think you should do is change the policy so that when you have a policy summary, And in the policy change document, you show the reader who proposed the change to the policy, not just some generic board members requested. That doesn't apply any degree of accountability or responsibility to the board. And I think you should do that. If you want to change something, put your name down. I respectfully request that you review your procedures and policies related to the security and police interactions with the public. I've communicated my feelings on this in a professional and calm way to John Wallingsford, with whom I had a respectful conversation. I know something about security, but I'm not getting paid by you to give you that advice. But I'll tell you this, every police officer and security officer in that building ought to know the exact law and rules and the basis for any orders that they give the public. Now, last night, a young woman who happens to be a employee of the county was there to talk about and express concerns about some aspect of the COVID policy that you have. She got up to leave the room for a minute to check on a friend, and someone came in and took her seat, and she was not allowed back in. And she managed to kind of work her way back in, and then a police officer was summoned to expel her. She was expelled from a meeting because she was won over the allocated amount, which I think was 53 people. The basis of that is not clear. It makes no sense. That room holds 280 some people, according to the fire marshal. I don't know what the basis is, but you should provide to the police officers and the security people the exact policy and the person responsible for it and who they should call if they don't like it. Now, that's only fair. Otherwise, you're putting these police officers and security people in an untenable position. You know, and people get fired up when you tell them, oh, the First Amendment doesn't apply here. Really? So I understand you have different, you have a certain amount of latitude with regard to restricting things. I appreciate that. But I think you should only do so to the extent absolutely necessary. And last night was not a shining example. I prepared a letter. I think I sent it last Tuesday to the board and to Dr. McDade. And my letter was, I think, 5 pages. And I expressed a couple sentiments in it. The first is I asked the following. You assert that you do not teach critical race theory in Prince William County schools, and I fully understand, and I think that's true. There's no class on it. But it looks like, because of the Virginia Department of Education initiatives and policy, and because of your own equity statement, that you intend to. Not to teach it, but to teach curriculum and to implement policies based on the tenets of the critical race theory movement's ideology. Now, to me, that's as clear as, the nose on your face. But I would like you to disabuse me of it. So I would ask this, Dr. Lateef, Dr. McDade, Miss Williams, you three in particular, do you support the implementation of critical race theory based policy in human resources, that's hiring, firing, and retention, in student management, including discipline, and the teacher development, and in curriculum for the students? I think the answer is no, based on everything you've said. But I'd like to hear that clearly enunciated. And if it is no, then what do you have an equity statement for? The second thing related to this is, do you support state-enforced equal outcomes in K through 12? Equal outcomes enforced by the state. In other words, state policy and Prince William County policy that results in outcomes being made equal or more equal. Now, the second longest part of my letter was to propose a policy, or a town hall series, really, to review the equity statement policy. I think it would take several. I've already communicated this once before to Dr. McDade and to Chairman Lateef. The last time I communicated was to everybody on the board and to Dr. McDade. I think it's a reasonable proposition. I'd be grateful if you'd look at it and consider it. So what I propose is that we walk through the equity statement with regard to its implementation. So it's a policy statement from the board. Now, Dr. McDade has to implement the policy. My question is how? Who? When? Where? Why? How much will it cost? What are the trade-offs? And the policy has a number of, they'll say, bullet point things that that translate that general statement into sort of what I'd call operational policy goals. The bullet number 4 says this: assuring all Prince William County Schools staff members examine and interrupt their beliefs, implicit and explicit biases, policies and/or practices that perpetuate systemic racism and discrimination. One of the fundamentals, Dr. McDade, you know this, of critical race theory is that it assumes as a foundational basis that there is systemic racism and discrimination. That's just the way it is. You know that, I know that. So with that statement in mind, I ask you this: how exactly do staff members examine and interrupt biases? Do you do an assessment? Do you use the IAT tool? Do you conduct bias remediation training for teachers and/or students? What does the scientific literature say about how that is to be done and whether it is valid, repeatable, effective? I have done some research on this, and I know about the faults of the IE test, and there may be some others I don't know about, but I'm have an open mind. I would like to see the scientific literature. Now, another important part of this is teacher development and retention. So there's a new thing, as you well know, out of the Virginia Department of Education called Culturally Responsive Teaching and Equitable Practices, Performance Standards, and Evaluation Criteria for Teachers. That's a mouthful. The teacher demonstrates a commitment to equity and provides instruction and classroom strategies that result in culturally inclusive and responsive learning environments and academic achievement for all students. And then it goes on and on about how exactly a teacher demonstrates that. My reading of it is, and you can disabuse me of this, but my reading of it is, the teacher has to demonstrate that she is prepared to fully execute the tenets of critical race theory or culturally responsive teaching, which is kind of the operational way of doing it in education, in my opinion. What actions are you going to take to employ or employed to raise or lower outcomes of designated student and teacher identity groups? What actions are required to achieve equity outcomes in staffing, hiring, promotions, other than performance and demonstrated skills and knowledge? Well, we know one, you've got to demonstrate that you're basically culturally responsive according to VDOE. Now, I'm proposing to work with the board and Dr. McDade to form a citizens review committee. I'll take people from both sides if you would allow me to do that. And I would ask that we be able to review your plan and to comment on it and to provide you feedback on it over a period of time. Now, I want to turn to the conduct of the meeting last night. I heard about the increased security. I can't remember where, but somebody sent me a message, or perhaps the board secretary did. I don't know. The clerk probably. But I was expecting a higher level of security. I was surprised that it reached the level it did with bag searches. And by the way, the staff, except one, were all very professional and gentle, and I think a little bit uncomfortable with this role they were placed in. Just my personal opinion. And I've communicated this to your security guru. Um, but I thought that was way, way too much. I don't think that the chief of police has identified a significant threat that would anywhere approach the kind of thing that would justify bag searches and so forth. But if he did, fine. I'd like to know if that's the case. And I think under only those circumstances should you get carried away like that. Now, the board was afraid. I know that. I've gotten that feedback. You were afraid. I don't know if raised voices are enough to justify that fear, but I can't get into your heads and understand your fear. But I think you went overboard. Perhaps it was based on bad advice from the security professionals. I don't know. Now, if the police chief said there was a threat, I'm all in. What the police chief did and what you did was put some young and older mature officers in a very awkward position of enforcing rules and policy which were not articulated, not in writing, and no one knew what they were or where they came from, except Dr. McDade. You were blamed for them. Okay, maybe they were yours. But wherever they came from, that ought to be clearly articulated to the officers, and they need to be prepared to provide that information to the citizens that come there to speak. That's, I think, an easy fix, and I think it would diffuse some of the tension. Now, I'm going to just tell you about one incident that just illustrates, and it basically made the group very much on edge. A young woman came in and sat down towards the back and got up, I guess, to talk to a friend. I don't want to get into who she is too much or anything about her because I'd like to protect her identity, because honestly, she's scared to death of being outed. So please keep that in mind. And if there's any inclination to do so, I'd ask you not to. But she went out into the atrium and then came back in. And during that time, someone had come in. And I understand the policy. You wanted to let people in and keep the room as full as possible and so forth. All kind of reasonable. But the room capacity, let's just say you said it was 53. Well, now it's 54. And you and your staff, and the security people and the cops could not exercise discretion in this case. You couldn't find another chair and move it out. And there were other chairs, a number of other chairs that you could have moved out or had her sit off to the side. But you didn't do that. And you gave the impression that you were playing hardball. And I think there's a time to play hardball. I don't think this was it. And you didn't do anything to improve the climate or the tension that might be roiling around in the community. So I believe that our First Amendment is a genius concept that was established by the founders, and it provides kind of a safety valve to let the pressure off, a way for both sides to argue it out in the public square. And I'm pleased to do that. I'll argue my case. I know most of you on the board don't agree with me. I understand that. I only ask for a respectful hearing. And I don't appreciate it when it looks like you're hiding the ball or lying. And Dr. Lateef, I think you might have lied. It looks like you did. I haven't heard you say you didn't. If you didn't, fine. But that gets people, and it gets me riled up when a public servant looks me in the eye and lies, in effect. So I don't like that, and I would ask you, please, Dr. Lateef, come out in public and say you didn't uh, mean it and you don't support critical race theory in any form, shape, or function. And you won't allow it anywhere near Prince William County. That would stop that train right there. I urge you to figure out a way to allow your citizens to question and receive answers on complex issues like critical race theory. And another one that's on the back of my mind is your legislative priorities, but I'm still studying that. And I've asked a question of my board member, and she's informed me of kind of the genesis of the thing. And right now I'm content. But I do think for issues like critical race theory or not, or the equity statement, we deserve to have a discussion, a forum. That's why I'm proposing in my paper that you form a town hall series. You put a board member or two on it. You have somebody from Dr. McDade's staff run it, and Dr. McDade and the equity officer and others could come before the public and brief us on their plan, and then allow us to ask questions. And I've already broken out the kinds of questions I think that could be asked and that you guys could present information on. After you shine light on this, it may go away. I don't know. But right now, it appears to be an obscure, hide the football kind of thing that is not getting better with time. So, with all of that said, I thank you for your time. Now, I took over 3 minutes. And so, thank you for indulging me. If you bothered to go to the clear end, I thank you for your time and consideration. And I hope you go in liberty. Goodbye.